What happens when a high-ranking black woman in law enforcement gets stopped and slapped by officers who don't know who she is? In a city built on quiet lines of power and unspoken rules, one morning jog sets off a chain reaction that no one saw coming. Before we dive in, let us know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. It was just past 6 when Marvina Cole laced up her sneakers and stepped outside. The morning air in early spring had that gentle edge, cool enough to feel clean, but not sharp. She took a breath, letting it settle in her chest, then started her slow jog along the edge of Greystone Ridge. The neighborhood was still waking up. A few porch lights flickered off. Sprinklers ticked rhythmically across manicured lawns. Driveways held polished SUVs. A man in a plaid robe bent to pick up his paper, then straightened and gave her a long look. Not rude, not friendly either. Just one of those, I see you but I don't know why you're here, looks she'd seen all her life. She didn't break stride, just kept moving. Marvina had made this loop 3 mornings a week for the last 2 years. She liked the stillness before the day began, liked how the sidewalks here were smooth and wide and safe. But more than that, it gave her a rhythm, something steady in a job that was anything but. As she turned onto East Laurel Drive, the quiet was interrupted by the slow crunch of tires. A patrol car. It crept behind her, close enough to be felt but not enough to call attention from anyone still half asleep in their homes. She knew that sound. She didn't look back. Not yet. Not until the siren chirped, just once, and the headlights flared briefly. She stopped, turned. 2 officers stepped out. One of them, tall and stocky, adjusted his belt like it made him more in charge. The other was younger, quiet, eyes scanning the street. "Morning," she said, voice steady. "You live around here, ma'am?" The taller one asked. His name tag read Volk. "I'm running, that's all." "Got some call," he said. "Residents saw someone suspicious. You match the description." Marvina raised an eyebrow. "What description is that?" He shrugged. "Black female, mid-40s, athletic wear." She nodded slowly, then exhaled. "So, me then." The second officer, Metz, shifted on his feet. He looked uneasy, like he wasn't quite comfortable with where this was headed. Folk stepped closer. "Do you have ID?" "I'm jogging," she said. "I don't carry my wallet." "You got a phone?" "I do." "Let's see it." She didn't move. "Why?" Folk's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, we're asking you nicely." Marvina kept her hands at her sides. Her heart wasn't racing, not yet, but something inside her had gone still. "I'll call my office," she said. "You can verify who I am." "That's not how this works," Folk snapped. "You're refusing to cooperate." "I'm refusing to be intimidated." She took out her phone. That's when it happened. Folk reached forward, grabbed her wrist. Not harshly at first, but firm. She pulled back on instinct, and in that single second, something shifted in his eyes. His hand moved fast, faster than she expected. The slap cracked the silence like a branch snapping underfoot. Her head jerked to the side. Her cheek burned. Birds startled from the trees above. Somewhere down the street, a door creaked shut. Marvina didn't fall. She didn't speak. She just stood there, stunned. Not from the pain, but from the knowing. That this was still the world she lived in. That no matter her title, no matter her purpose, to some people she would always be just a threat. Folk's voice was distant now, like it came through cotton. "You're obstructing. That's an offense." She turned back slowly, eyes locking onto his. She felt the heat in her face but refused to raise her voice. "You just made a terrible mistake," she said quietly. Metz looked away. The wind shifted, brushing against her damp hair. The houses stood still. No curtains moved. No one came. And yet, something had cracked open, not just in the moment, but in her. The weight she carried every day for the job, for the people she hoped to protect, pressed heavier now. But there was no fear in it, only clarity. Marvina sat on a weathered wooden bench near the edge of Hopewell Green, her arms resting on her thighs, palms open. She hadn't said much since the slap. Her cheeks still stung, but she paid it no mind. Pain was easy. What lingered was the quiet fury she'd learned to carry like a folded note in her coat pocket, always there, always ready. Folk had barked at her to cooperate, then stepped back, clearly unsure of what to do next. Metz was still hovering near the patrol car, arms crossed tightly, glancing between them like he wished he could disappear into the mist curling up from the grass. The trees rustled with the morning breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a jogger's rhythmic steps faded down another trail, unbothered. Then came the radio crackle. Unit 14, disengage immediately. I repeat, disengage and stand down. Confirm the voice was female, calm, crisp, and firm. Volk looked up, scowling. Say again? You heard it, Metz mumbled. Volk hesitated, then reached for the mic. Disengaging, as ordered. They both looked at Marvina. Her posture hadn't changed. She was still as stone. The SUV pulled up silently behind them. Black, clean, government plates. The doors opened slowly. Deputy Chief Eleanor Voss stepped out, her face unreadable. Short gray hair neatly tucked behind her ears, hands in the pockets of her navy blue jacket. She walked straight to Marvina, nodded once, then turned to the two officers. She's one of ours, Voss said. Actually, she's mine. You two are dismissed. Volk's eyes narrowed. We had reports. She's also the director of Internal Cultural Reform. Your superior, in case you weren't briefed, Eleanor said, still level, but with a weight behind each word that made Metz flinch. Volk's jaw moved, but nothing came out. Then, with a heavy breath through his nose, he turned and walked back to the car. Metz followed without a word. Marvina finally looked up at Eleanor. They always think they know who they're talking to, she said quietly. Eleanor nodded, eyes scanning the park. That's the problem, isn't it? They rode in silence for the first few blocks. The SUV was quiet, the kind that swallowed up road noise. Marvina watched the houses go by. Same gated lawns, same stone mailboxes, same tension under the surface. I didn't plan to intervene this soon, Eleanor finally said. I didn't plan to get slapped either. There was a pause, then they both let out a short, dry laugh. It didn't last. You know I didn't give your name to anyone, Eleanor added. You wanted to run your survey blind, blend in, get a sense of how officers respond in the field. Marvina nodded. Still the right call. You sure? I needed to see it myself. They turned onto a quieter road, lined with dogwoods just starting to bloom. Eleanor adjusted the rearview mirror but didn't look at Marvina directly when she spoke again. My best friend, she said, Janice, taught third grade for almost 20 years. Sweet, shy, wouldn't hurt a fly. Marvina waited. She got pulled over one night, driving home from a school fundraiser. The officer thought she was someone else, some suspicious person from an earlier call. He pulled her out of the car. She panicked, tried to call her husband. He shoved her. She hit her head on the pavement. Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She died 2 days later. Internal report said there was no wrongdoing. I wasn't even in the department back then. I was a consultant. I'm sorry, Marvina said. Eleanor shook her head. I tell you that because I want you to understand. I believe in what you're doing. I believe in why you're doing it, but it's going to cost you. I know. They pulled into the back entrance of the precinct. No press, no officers milling about, just concrete and quiet. Before Marvina stepped out, Eleanor put a hand on her arm. Let me handle the fallout. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. Marvina looked at her steady. But I will. A nod passed between them, one of mutual understanding. Not friendship exactly, but a recognition. Two women, both shaped by loss, both holding the line in their own way. As Marvina walked toward the side entrance, the air seemed different, denser somehow. Not fear, not anger. Focus. She didn't check her reflection, didn't straighten her coat. She just opened the door and stepped inside, ready. The hallway of the North Atlanta Community Police Division always smelled faintly of printer toner and burnt coffee. It was the kind of smell you didn't notice after a while, unless something else in the air made it stand out. And that morning there was something else, something quieter, heavier. Tension. It clung to the walls like humidity in summer, unspoken, but thick enough that Marvina could feel it pressing against her skin the moment she stepped through the glass doors. The chatter that usually filled the lobby died down like someone turned the volume knob down fast. A few heads turned, some faces surprised, others unreadable. One officer nodded with polite stiffness, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to look her in the eye. Two others turned abruptly away, suddenly fascinated by the vending machine or the dusty flyer about workplace wellness. No one said her name. She kept walking, each step measured, heels tapping on the linoleum. Her shoulders didn't slump. Her face didn't flinch. But inside something pulsed. Not fear, not even anger exactly. Just the steady hum of being watched with the kind of attention that didn't come from curiosity, but discomfort. She passed a group of 3 officers near the bulletin board. They were mid-conversation until they saw her. One of them, McKinley Rhodes, shifted his stance. He'd worked here longer than most, known for his loyalty to his own more than to the badge. He didn't say anything, but the way his jaw tensed was enough. His eyes narrowed a touch. Not aggressive, not kind. Bracing. Marvina didn't break stride. Didn't give them the satisfaction of looking away or looking down. But the weight of those glances, of all the silence and not saying, it pressed against her spine harder than she wanted to admit. Inside her office, she let the door shut gently behind her. The quiet was immediate and oddly sharp, like air after a thunderclap. She stood still, hand on the back of her chair, taking one long breath. Then she sat, opened her laptop, and let the glow of the screen pull her back into motion. Her inbox blinked with red, dozens of unread messages, press inquiries, internal memos, one from HR, one marked urgent from someone in legal, all waiting. But what caught her eye was the forwarded email from someone she barely knew in communications. Just a subject line and a link. Unknown woman disrupts peace in Greystone Ridge. Stopped by local officers. She clicked. The article was short, thrown together like it had been written on a lunch break. Just enough words to imply a story without telling one. No names, no mention of violence. Just phrases like possible misunderstanding and concerned residents. A tone of civility wrapped tightly around something rotten. It wasn't truth. It was a placeholder, a shape given to silence. Marvina sat back, the tension shifting from her shoulders into her chest. She reached for her phone, scrolling past messages and missed calls until she found the name she needed. Gina Carr. Years ago, Gina had been a crime reporter for one of Atlanta's major newspapers, until she quit, loudly, after refusing to bury a story about a deadly traffic stop. These days, she ran her own platform, independent, sharp, and not afraid to burn bridges. Marvina tapped call. Marvina, Gina answered quickly, her voice clipped and focused. I need you to see something, Marvina said. I've got video. From my personal cam. You okay? I'm fine, she lied, but this can't stay buried. You got full footage? 38 seconds, she said, but enough. Send it, I'll prep it. She hung up and opened the file on her laptop. She didn't watch it again. She didn't need to. She remembered every second. The way Folk's hand grabbed her wrist. The slap. The birds scattering from the trees. Her own face calm and firm, like she'd been bracing for it long before it happened. She dragged the file into a blank email. Hit send. That afternoon, a meeting was called. Mandatory but quiet. No press. Just a small windowless room with the ethics review panel. Long table. Plastic pitchers of water. One flag in the corner. Eleanor sat at the head, hands folded. Marvina across from her. Officer Volk off to the side, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a spot somewhere near the floor. Director Cole, Eleanor said, her voice steady. Please walk us through your experience. Marvina stood. No notes, no dramatics. She told them about the morning, the routine, the slow patrol car, the questions, the slap, the look on Volk's face after. She played the clip. The sound of it, the slap, hung in the air longer than the image. Then she sat down. No one said anything right away. Eleanor turned to Volk. Officer, would you like to respond? He didn't flinch. I didn't know who she was, he said. I thought she was someone else. Those 5 words sat like cold coffee. Someone else. The phrase didn't mean confusion. It meant assumption. It meant Marvina was black and in the wrong place, and that was enough. She didn't flinch. She just watched him, watched the way his expression didn't change, like he believed that explanation should be enough. Rhodes shifted in his seat, suddenly fascinated by his notepad. A few others looked down. After the meeting, Eleanor found her in the hallway. "It'll take more than that to move the needle," she said quietly. Marvina met her eyes. "I know," she replied, "but so do they." That night, her phone buzzed. A message from Gina. "Going live at 6. You might want to stay off social for a bit." By 6:15, the video was everywhere. 38 seconds, no commentary, just the clip. Uncut, watermarked only with Gina's logo in the corner. People started asking questions. Not just what happened, but why it keeps happening. The narrative shifted, and for the first time in a long time, Marvina didn't feel like she was walking through it alone. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because the silence was finally breaking. Marvina sat at her desk, the untouched coffee cooling by her elbow, its bitter scent mingling with the office's usual trace of toner and old carpet. Outside the window, the trees lining the precinct parking lot shifted gently in the breeze, but inside the building buzzed like a beehive, unsettled. The kind of murmur that happened when something big was unfolding, when people whispered in corners instead of speaking aloud. Phones rang more than usual. Conversations lowered to tight, clipped phrases. Footsteps seemed faster, more uncertain. And Marvina could feel it, not in a panicked way, but in that quiet, electric knowing. She had lived long enough to recognize the sound of people deciding whether to stand beside you or step away. For the first time since taking the job, her name was the Storm Center. There was a knock at her door. Her assistant peeked in, voice softer than usual. "Mayor Halbrook's office is on line 1. He'd like to speak with you directly." Marvina nodded, setting down the pen she hadn't been using. "Put him through." There was a click, then a brief, static buzz, followed by the mayor's voice. Measured, deliberate, with that practiced edge of reassurance politicians used when they were trying to wrap bad news in calm tones. "Marvina," he began, "I've been following the developments. This situation, it's got people stirred up." She didn't answer right away. "I'd imagine it does," she said, her voice even. He let out a little laugh, too smooth, like a late-night host trying to lighten the air. "Listen, I know tensions are high, and I want to be sure we're handling this the right way. For the city's sake, for public trust. You understand?" "I do," she said flatly, already sensing where this was going. "I'd like to suggest we keep this internal," he continued. "The department can issue a statement, maybe about reviewing training protocols, maybe even form a new committee for transparency. You stay on the job, we move forward, quietly." There was a pause, long enough for her to feel her pulse shift in her throat. "You're asking me not to speak." "I'm asking you to protect the integrity of the department and the city," he replied. "You're in a leadership role. People look to you to be the grown-up in the room." Her hand gripped the coffee mug tighter, knuckles paling. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'll think about it," she said calmly. But when the call ended, she rose, walked out of her office, and stepped into the late afternoon light like someone who needed to remember how air was supposed to feel. The sun hung low, stretching long shadows across the parking lot. A breeze carried the faint smell of cut grass from somewhere down the block. She walked slowly past the side gate, letting her mind catch up with her body. As she neared the old red post box that rarely held anything but flyers and missed bills, something pale caught her eye. A cream-colored envelope. No return address, just her name, handwritten in a careful, slightly wobbly script, to Marvina Cole. Back at her desk, she opened it gently like something sacred. Inside was a letter. Neat cursive, the ink just faint enough to show age, but not fragility. "I didn't say anything that day. I watched it happen from my kitchen window. I saw the way they treated you, and I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I'm ashamed of that, but I believe you. I know what I saw, and I want you to know, not all of us look away. Sincerely, Margaret L. Henley, Greystone Ridge." The name hit her like a bell. Henley, not just a neighbor. Ms. Henley, ninth grade English, the woman who made them read "To Kill a Mockingbird" out loud, then circled back and asked, "Now what does that kind of justice really mean to you?" Marvina could hear her voice now, gentle, unhurried. the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. She remembered the time Ms. Henley had pulled her aside after class when she was 15, and angry and shrinking herself into silence. The words were simple, but they had stuck like glue. You don't have to blend in to belong. And now, all these years later, that same voice had spoken again, from a window across the street. Marvina stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it back into its envelope with care. She thought of silence, how it grows like mildew in the corners of power, how it feeds on good intentions left unspoken. She thought about Officer Metz, who had watched it all happen and lowered his eyes, about the officers in the hallway who averted their gaze, about the mayor who had just asked her, so gently, to do the same. She thought about her mother wiping down granite countertops in Greystone Ridge long before Marvina ever set foot there, thought about the days when her mother came home with sore knees and a sorer pride, but still sat down at the dinner table and said, "Baby, never let them tell you where you belong." The next morning, Marvina made 2 copies of the letter, one for her file, one for Eleanor, and one she printed on thick ivory paper, tucked it into a slim leather folder, and carried it with her into City Hall. The meeting was quiet, measured. Just her, Mayor Halbrook, and his chief of staff. They smiled the kind of smile meant to smooth over corners, offered her coffee, asked how she was holding up. The room was polished and polite, but Marvina didn't sit to be soothed. She slid the letter across the table. "What's this?" the mayor asked, his voice dipping with caution. "A reason," she said, "to speak, and not just for myself." She looked him square in the eye, her words slow and steady. "I won't be silent. I know what the cost is. I've seen it. But I also know what silence costs everyone else. And I didn't take this job to watch history repeat itself." The mayor leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, but he said nothing. "I'm going to speak publicly," she continued. "If that means I lose this job, so be it. But I won't lose myself with it." She stood, folder in hand, shoulders square. And for the first time since the slap, since the questions, since the quiet churning began, she didn't feel like she was walking alone. She felt like the ground was finally firm beneath her feet. The mayor's office always smelled like lemon polish and pressure, a sterile, polished scent masking years of worn carpet, closed-door deals, and voices too rehearsed to ever be fully trusted. Marvina sat across from Glenn Halbrook at a long, glossy oak table that reflected the harsh overhead lighting. She didn't shift in her seat. Her folder lay closed before her, untouched. The room was too quiet. No background chatter, no hallway footsteps. Just the expectant, watchful hush of something being negotiated without being named. Mayor Halbrook wore his usual gray suit, tailored, spotless, too perfect to touch. His cufflinks glinted when he folded his hands, leaning forward with a look that tried to say ally, but felt like strategy. Next to him was Cameron Niles, the city's communications advisor. Younger, smoother. Everything about him gleamed. Hair, smile, even his pen. He had the kind of practiced stillness of someone who rarely heard the word no. "Marvina," Halbrook began, voice calm and practiced, "we're grateful for everything you've done. Really, the city's been watching your work. We've been impressed." Marvina said nothing. She had learned long ago that when someone starts with gratitude, they're often about to ask you to disappear gracefully. Halbrook continued, "We also understand this past week has been difficult. The public's reacting quickly, emotionally. That video stirred up some raw nerves." "It wasn't the video," she replied, voice steady. "It was what the video showed." There was a flicker of annoyance in Halbrook's eyes, gone almost as quickly as it came. "What we need now is unity," he said, "and we think you can help us lead that." Cameron slid a folder across the table. Glossy cover, bold text. She didn't touch it. "We'd like to offer you a new position," he said. "Senior advisor to the mayor's office for community trust initiatives." Marvina's gaze didn't shift. "I already have a job." "This isn't about replacing your role," Cameron added quickly. "It's about elevation. Less day-to-day, more big picture. Vision, messaging." Her silence deepened. Halbrook leaned back, adjusting his tie. "We believe your strengths are best used at a higher level, No more entanglement in disciplinary logistics. Just guiding strategy, shaping the conversation. There it was. Not a promotion, a soft removal, a clean redirect. Take the new title, step quietly aside, and let the institution reset behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She let it buzz. We want to avoid further division, Halbrook added. Marvina inhaled slowly. So do I. She stood, calm, unshaken. I'll take the materials, she said. I'll review them. She didn't say thank you. She walked out of the room without looking back. Later, sitting in her car beneath the City Hall garage's low ceiling, she checked her phone. One new message. From Eleanor. Don't let them buy you out. She didn't reply. Just sat there for a while, hands resting on the folder in her lap. The proposal inside felt heavy, not from its weight, but from everything it represented. It was almost dusk when she pulled into the small parking lot behind Olive and Pine. The cafe hadn't changed in 20 years. The same reclaimed wood floors, the same chalkboard menu with too many flourishes, the same quiet murmur of conversation wrapped in espresso steam and muted jazz. She hadn't been here since college. Not since the day she sat in the corner after class, flipping through her textbook when a woman at the next table leaned over and asked, "Are you waiting for someone who works here?" Not cruel, just casual, like the question had already answered itself. She'd smiled, nodded, and left early that day. Now she chose the same corner table. This time she didn't order anything. Just sat, alone, watching the golden light creep across the floorboards. She opened the folder, pulled out the cover sheet. Strategic collaboration, long-term messaging, public reassurance. None of it meant anything without action behind it. Her fingers found the pen in her coat pocket. She pressed it to the page and wrote, slow, careful strokes, as if carving something meant to last. I don't want a title. I want change. She read it once, then tore the page down the middle. Clean. No hesitation. She left the pieces neatly on the table, folded back into the folder like a message sent without an address. Outside, the air had turned sharp and clean. The night sky above Atlanta was cloudless, just dark enough for a few stars to peek through the haze. Her breath came out in soft puffs as she walked toward her car, but she didn't feel cold. She felt clear. And as she started the engine, she knew this wasn't just about a job. It was about what kind of ground she wanted to stand on and who she was willing to be when no one else would draw the line. The press conference was supposed to be routine. That was the word passed down through the chain of command, muttered in hallways and passed along in clipped emails. A short briefing, a message of unity. Nothing too deep, nothing too dangerous. Just enough to calm the public and put a lid on the noise. But the moment Marvina stepped into the main briefing room of the North Atlanta Community Police Division, she knew nothing about this moment would be routine. The room was already full, journalists setting up their microphones, flashbulbs testing in short bursts, uniformed officers lining the walls, some with arms folded, others standing too still. Local media were there in full force, but so were a few national outlets, their cameras aimed like quiet weapons, waiting. Eleanor Voss stood off to the side, not saying a word, her posture tight, her arms crossed like she was holding something in. When her eyes met Marvina's, she gave the smallest of nods. It wasn't a signal. It was a promise. You're not alone. At the front, Mayor Halbrook adjusted his lapel mic, then leaned in to whisper to the event coordinator, eyes flicking, quick, tense, toward Marvina. His jaw shifted. She saw the calculation in it, the same way a lawyer sizes up a jury. He was hoping she would smile, wave, and sit down. She didn't. Marvina took a breath and stepped forward. I'd like to speak, she said, loud enough for the front row of press to glance up. The mayor turned, slow and controlled. His face held a smile, but it had no warmth. This was meant to be a joint statement, he murmured, not quite into the mic. I understand, she replied, but I won't be silent. For a moment you could hear the shuffle of notepads, the faint beep of a live camera locking focus. Then Halbrook gave a tight, performative nod and stepped aside. She took the podium. No script, no teleprompter. Just her voice. My name is Marvina Cole, she began, voice steady, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the podium. I'm the Director of Internal Cultural Reform here at the North Atlanta Community Police Division. She let the title sit for a moment, not to impress, but to make a point. Many of you have seen the video. You've read the headlines, some of them true, some of them not so much. She looked out at the crowd, not searching for sympathy, just looking for someone who was truly listening. What happened to me last week wasn't new, she said. It wasn't rare. It wasn't even surprising. The only thing that made it different was that this time, people saw it happen to someone they didn't expect. A ripple went through the crowd, too quiet to measure but not to ignore. I've spent my life walking a line between who I am and what I do. I'm a Black woman. I'm the daughter of a housekeeper. I grew up learning how to speak clearly, stand tall, and watch my tone, even when I hadn't done anything wrong. She let those words land. But I'm also a leader in this department. I didn't come here to manage scandals. I came here to ask hard questions about the power we hold and who gets left out when we protect it. She paused. There were no interruptions, just the hum of the lights overhead. This isn't about one slap, she said, voice still low but firmer now. It's about what that slap revealed, that even someone with my badge, my title, my experience, can still be seen first as a threat, still be treated like a stranger in the neighborhood where I run every morning. Some officers glanced at each other. A few stared down at their boots. The mayor's lips pressed tight. I didn't ask for special treatment. I asked for basic respect, and I'm not the only one who's been denied that. She stepped back from the podium. There was no applause, no cheering, just stillness. Not awkward, just full. Then, from the right side of the room, a familiar voice pierced the quiet. So now we take lectures from people who sneak around pretending to be victims? Heads turned. Darren Volk was leaning against the back wall, arms folded across his chest. His tone wasn't angry, just laced with contempt, like he'd been waiting for this moment. You knew what you were doing, he said louder. You stirred it up so you could swoop in with your little speech. Some gas, a few murmurs. Cameras swung toward him. Halbrook looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him. Marvina didn't flinch. She turned toward Volk, her expression unreadable. You didn't know who I was, she said calmly. That's exactly the problem. The room didn't move. Volk opened his mouth again, but stopped. Maybe the silence hit him harder than any words could have. He turned and walked out, alone. It wasn't until later that evening that Marvina heard about the hashtag. A woman, just a regular citizen, not an activist, had posted a photo of herself tying her running shoes. The caption was short. If Marvina can run through that neighborhood, so can we. Hashtag Run with Marvina. By nightfall, it had caught fire. Teachers, students, retirees, people of all backgrounds. People who'd never said much before, not with fists, not with chants, just with feet. And with that, Marvina knew. This moment wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had been made to feel small, everyone who had walked a little faster past patrol cars, everyone who had learned to hold their breath just a little tighter in certain zip codes. They were all lacing up now, and that was a march no one could stop. The conference room wasn't made for moments like this. No windows, no distractions, just a long rectangular table, 12 high-backed chairs, and the stale hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The kind of room where decisions didn't echo. They absorbed into the walls like secrets. A small digital recorder blinked red at the center of the table. No reporters, no cameras, just accountability, stripped of audience. Marvina sat with her folder open in front of her, each tab meticulously labeled. She hadn't dressed for war, but for clarity. Pressed navy blouse, no jewelry except her wedding band. A quiet calm in the set of her jaw. She didn't clear her throat, didn't shuffle her notes. She just began. On the morning of February 8th, she said, I was running my usual route through Greystone Ridge. She told it plainly. The slow-moving patrol car, the stop, the questions, the slap. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. Then she slid a USB drive across the table. It's from my personal body cam. You'll see the interaction. start to finish. I've marked the timestamp where physical contact occurred. Someone across the table, a man with silver-rimmed glasses and a clenched jaw, leaned forward to jot something down. Most didn't speak. A few avoided eye contact altogether. Then came the second document, a printed letter, signed and dated by Margaret Henley. She had written about what she saw from her kitchen window, how she hesitated, stayed silent, and regretted it deeply. It wasn't long, but it was real. Marvina didn't offer commentary. She let the letter speak for itself, but her closing sentence lingered, even after her voice stopped. We cannot call it a misunderstanding when it happens again and again. That's not confusion. That's culture. Silence followed. Not out of disrespect, but because some truths don't need immediate replies. Eleanor Voss entered the room then, as if on cue, and took her seat at the far end. She hadn't brought notes, just her memory and her patience. I've worked in 5 departments across 3 states, she began, her voice gravelly but composed. And in every one, I've seen an incident like this. Different faces. Same pattern. She leaned forward, not to lecture, but to level. The issue isn't just one officer making a bad call. It's the people around him who knew he might, who heard the way he talked in the locker room, saw the reports dismissed, and decided it wasn't their place to step in. Eleanor glanced down the table. Her gaze wasn't angry. It was tired, heavy with years of watching things get swept away. If we let this slide, what we're really saying is that culture comes before accountability, that the uniform protects itself. No one interrupted her. The head of the committee, an older woman with streaks of silver in her braid, finally cleared her throat. We'll take a vote, she said, quiet but firm. The voting wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no table pounding. Just names called, heads nodded, and notes taken. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Officer Darren Volk, terminated effective immediately. Internal review opened for his direct supervisor and any personnel with knowledge of past complaints that were dismissed without review. The room emptied slowly, like a tide pulling back. Marvina stayed behind to gather her papers. She wasn't in a rush. She wasn't waiting for someone to say, "Congratulations." There were no winners here, just a line in the sand that had finally been acknowledged. When she stepped into the hallway, the building felt quieter than usual. She turned a corner and nearly bumped into him. Volk. He was standing by the vending machine, arms folded, his eyes dark but no longer smug. The smirk was gone. So was the swagger. He looked like someone who hadn't slept well in days. You really think this'll fix anything? He asked. His tone wasn't cruel. It was worn, not challenging, just hollow. Marvina didn't hesitate. No, she said, but it might stop the next punch. They didn't argue. They didn't explain. For a moment, they just stood there, 2 people on either side of something broken. Volk looked past her, then turned and walked away. That evening, the department issued a formal statement. No dramatic language, just the facts. The local stations covered it in short segments. National networks hadn't picked it up yet, but online, the conversation was gaining momentum. People weren't asking if something happened. They were asking what would change because of it. A week later, the department rolled out a draft of a new initiative, one born not from backroom meetings, but shaped by community input, civilian review, and full transparency. An internal task force built not to defend, but to examine, to uncover the quiet patterns, to stop the slow rot before it spread. And at its helm, not a figurehead or a name on a letterhead, Marvina. They didn't call it a promotion. She wouldn't have accepted it if they had. It was something rarer than that. It was trust. Not from everyone, but from enough to begin. That night, Marvina stood in her office. Lights dimmed, blinds opened to the skyline. The city buzzed beyond the glass. Cars moved like tiny lights in a silent river. She wasn't naive. This wasn't the end. But it wasn't just about cleaning up something broken anymore. It was about building something worth protecting from the inside out. The headlines landed quietly just after sunrise. No sirens, no breaking news banners, just a calm procession of news anchors across Atlanta, speaking the same sentence into living rooms, cafes, and car radios. Officer terminated after internal review, finds use of excessive force. Most outlets use the same photo. Marvina behind a podium, shoulders squared, her face composed, not triumphant, not angry, just steady, like someone who had stood in the storm long enough to know where to place her feet. Some coverage praised the decision. Others framed it as a political overreach. A dangerous message to law enforcement, one anchor said. A necessary message to the community, said another. But that wasn't the conversation that mattered most. It was the quieter responses, the ones that didn't come with headlines. In a neighborhood Facebook group that usually revolved around lawn care, missing cats, and which grocery store had eggs on sale, one woman wrote, "I used to wave at patrol cars. I never asked who they stopped or why. That ends today." In a diner near I-85, an older man stirred his coffee, watching the screen above the counter. He didn't speak at first. Then, to no one in particular, he muttered, "About damn time." Marvina didn't scroll through the comments or chase the news cycles. She let it all move past her like wind through tall grass, loud at the surface, quiet beneath. It wasn't the noise she was listening for. It was the shift underneath, the hum, the turning. That morning, she laced up her running shoes like she always did. No bodyguard, no press in tow, just herself. She stepped outside before the city truly woke up, the sky still tinged with lavender and pale blue. She walked to the same stretch of sidewalk near her street corner. Her breath was calm, her pace easy. Greystone Ridge looked the same hedges trimmed to perfection, the same stone mailboxes, the same homes with silent camera bells and neat driveways. But something was different. Not in what she saw, but in what she didn't feel. She didn't feel watched, not like before. She passed a driveway where a man collected his newspaper. He glanced up. Their eyes met. He gave a small nod, not a challenge, just acknowledgement. And then, near the park entrance, a woman walking a golden retriever slowed as Marvina jogged past. She looked up, silver hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. "Good morning," she said, her voice even, gentle. Marvina returned the greeting with a soft smile. "Morning." The words hung in the air a little longer than they needed to, but they felt whole. At Hopewell Green, the bench near the hydrangeas was already occupied. Margaret Henley sat straight, cardigan folded over her shoulders, hands clasped in her lap like she'd been waiting. Marvina slowed and took a seat beside her without asking. They watched a squirrel dart beneath the bushes. A pair of robins tugged at the same worm in the grass. "I thought I'd see you," Margaret said. Marvina looked at her, her expression softening. "I hoped you'd be here." They didn't talk much at first. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt earned. Then Margaret said, almost in a whisper, "My son was 16 when it happened, walking home from a friend's house. Took the wrong turn." Marvina turned to face her fully. They told him he matched a description, made him lie flat on the sidewalk, in front of someone's sprinklers. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "He didn't fight. He didn't cry. He just laid there, like he knew not to hope for anything better." Marvina let the silence stretch, respectful. Then softly, "Did you report it?" Margaret shook her head. "We were scared. His father wanted to raise hell. I told him to let it go. I thought silence would keep him safe." She looked down at her folded hands. "But silence doesn't protect anyone. It just hides the bruise." Marvina nodded. "I know that now, and I think a lot of people are just starting to." Later that day, she stood before a room of new recruits at the academy. Some sat up straight, full of pride. Others looked around nervously, unsure of what they'd signed up for. A few had the hardened stare she'd seen before, the kind that came too early, too eager to prove something. She didn't bring notes. "When I took this job," she began, "a lot of people told me not to expect much, that you can't change culture, that the best I could do was keep things quiet." She let her words hang. "But justice isn't a destination," she said. "It's a direction, and every day we decide where to walk." She looked around the room. "You will be someone's first impression of what safety looks like, or what fear feels like. You carry that power whether you feel ready or not. So use it with intention. Use it like it matters. Because it does." Back at the department that afternoon, the air felt lighter, not cheerful, not fixed, but different. She passed a group of younger officers, black, white, Latino, clustered around a whiteboard, hashing out new ideas for the code of conduct. They were talking fast, debating, disagreeing, but they didn't stop when she walked by. They didn't hush. They kept going. Eleanor appeared at her office doorway, holding a slim manila folder. "It's time to pick your next team," she said, voice low. "You're building it from scratch." Marvina took the folder. It wasn't heavy, but it carried weight. The next morning she ran again. Same shoes, same rhythm, same path. This time no patrol cars trailing behind. No sideways glances, just air and breath and movement. As she reached Maple Street, she saw a young girl, maybe 9, maybe 10, jogging beside her mother. Brown skin, curly ponytail bouncing with each step. As they passed, the girl turned her head and smiled. She lifted a small hand and waved. Marvina slowed, just enough to wave back and nod. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to say, "I see you too." And maybe, just maybe, keep running. Change doesn't always come with sirens or speeches. Sometimes it starts with one quiet voice refusing to stay silent. Marvina's story reminds us that real justice isn't about titles or headlines, but about the courage to stand your ground when it would be easier to step aside. What would you have done in her shoes? If this story moved you, don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss what comes next.